My name is Jacob Connor. I'm a transit planner with SRF Consulting, joined by 5 of my colleagues here. Our session is looking at NITA. Senator Villavalum just gave an awesome introduction to the creation of NITA and talking about different pieces of it. In our session, we wanted to zoom out a little bit more and look statewide. So we are going to be talking about aspects of NITA as well as some other statewide plans. And the group that we pulled together, we've got 2 transit operators downstate, not too far away, just west, and everybody will introduce themselves and talk about their organizations. But pulling together also IDOT, who will play a major role in implementation of NITA outside of Chicagoland, as well as research from UIC with Dr. Sriraj. So without further ado, I'll let everybody introduce themselves and talk a little bit about what they do.
Hi, my name is Kim. I am the transit director for North Central Area Transit, which is a rural provider in LaSalle County, which is an hour and a half southwest of Chicago.
Good afternoon. I'm Greg Gates. I'm the executive director for Reagan Mass Transit District, which is a 2, soon to be 3 county district. It's about straight 100 miles west of the city of Chicago.
And I'm Hannah Schmidt. Also Hannah Martin last year if you were here. But I am the transit program planning manager for IDOT. I'm in the Bureau of Planning. I've been the project manager for Next Move Illinois. I work out of Springfield and live in Peoria.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is David Schafer. I'm the Bureau Chief for Transit Operations at IDOT. I oversee the state and federal operations funding for our small urbans, and rural providers outside of the NITA region, as well as the intercity bus program.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is P.S. Sriraj. It's not a bait and switch. That's just from a few decades ago. That's about it. I serve as a research professor in the College of Urban Planning and Public Affairs at UIC, and also director of the Urban Transportation Center. In case you're wondering what the director of the Urban Transportation Center is here talking about rural transit, I'm also wondering the same.
Thank you, everyone. Putting up a map here, I figure we'll start the conversation by painting a little picture of what transit outside of Chicagoland looks like. I know most folks here are from the area, work in transit in the city and the suburbs. So Hannah and David, if you wouldn't mind just giving a little overview, the number of transit systems, the scale of service, locations across the state, anything else you've got in your mind.
Yeah, so Illinois has, this fiscal year, we operate transit in 101 of 102 counties, which is remarkable. But we're a little short of that 102 county goal. Thankfully, I can say that starting July 1st, Illinois will be one of the very first states to operate transit in all 102 counties across the state of Illinois. So our lone holdout was Henderson County. We got them up and running. Warren County Public Transit is going to go over there and provide that service. So we have 53 systems outside of the NITA region. That's 51,838 square miles. And in downstate, which is, again, everything outside of that NITA region, in federal fiscal year 24, because that's the last year we have complete data for, that region provided 23,625,000 rides, which is remarkable. Obviously, it's not the 300 million that is provided with the NITA region, but for rural downstate of Illinois, it's pretty remarkable. So, and we can't do that without the amount of funding that we've gotten across the state. If you look at it, the amount of funding in the state per population is remarkably higher in Illinois versus any of the surrounding states in the Midwest.
Yeah, I can't really add much to that other than just to say that, you know, the way that we think about rural when it comes to the transit systems, it's defined by the census. So if you want to get all nerdy in Census Bureau data, you know, you're looking at populations of less than 50,000. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you don't have a fixed route system. Macomb in Western Illinois University, you know, they offer a fixed route system, but that is still considered rural. But a lot of those are probably more like Greg and Kim's services where they're operating as demand response, kind of your dial a ride. You're just going to pick up this person where they are and take them door to door. So it is very different than a lot of the public systems here in the NITA region.
Great, thank you. So yeah, from the state level, want to look a little bit more closer at a couple agencies. Kim and Greg each operate demand response systems. They're neighboring each other. Could you describe your service areas, the services you provide, the communities you serve, and sort of the importance of transit in your communities?
Sure. So LaSalle County is, like I said, an hour and a half southwest of Chicago. We have Interstate 80 and Interstate 39 kind of connect or intersect, I guess, right almost in the middle. The total square miles, since David brought up what the downstate miles were, we are about 1,100 square miles, the second largest county in the state, again, if we want to get nerdy, based on mileage. And then we have a population of about 108,000. We provide that demand response or dial a ride type service, so the rider has to call in advance, schedule their ride. We put all of those rides into our transit software, which it's like a giant puzzle, creates these routes, and then we pick these people up at their homes and take them wherever they want to go. Work, medical, visit their friends. We've taken people to funerals before, so wherever they need to go, anywhere you would go in your personal vehicle, we provide that service through our demand response service. We operate Monday through Friday, 6:30 a.m. to 6:30 p.m. Last fiscal year, we provided 77,000 rides, and of those 108,000 residents, we serve roughly 2,000 individuals. So a lot of people, I should say a little bit of people, are doing a lot of transportation, right? So 2,000 individuals taking 77,000 trips. I can get into the nitty-gritty of what our purposes are, but I'll kind of save that for later conversations if that comes up, because I don't want to talk too much, and Lord knows I can.
There's a lot of what Kim just said where I would just say ditto in terms of what our system looks like. We too are also a demand response. Lee and Ogle counties currently is, like again, 100 miles straight west of Chicago. We are to the north of LaSalle County, so just north of where Kim's operation is, and about 45 minutes southwest of Rockford and northeast of the Quad Cities. What we do on an annual basis, we're projected to do about 93,000 rides for a population base of around 89,000. I think one of the pieces that oftentimes gets missed with the rural that we can't emphasize enough is obviously we're traveling a lot of miles to make these rides a reality. I think in the most recent complete fiscal year, we had more than 1 million miles that our 30 some odd buses actually traveled on a daily basis. Our hours of operation, 6A to 6P. And looking at the type of service locations we're taking these people to, a lot, obviously, of those community resources, whether it's the grocery store, medical appointments, work, school, seem to resonate with what a lot of people actually have as a need in terms of our service area. Currently, the asterisk that we also do in terms of our service base is one of the remaining counties, and David was persuasive in having Reagan Mass Transit District start a service for rural Winnebago. So if you know where Rockford is, we're doing basically the western portion of that county. Prior to July 1st of 2025, that section of rural Winnebago did not have any public transportation services. So we're really growing something from the base up, and we can talk about that piece a little longer and later in this presentation. One unique piece that is also probably not always common with rural providers is we actually currently administer 2 intercity bus routes on behalf of IDOT. The one that's the oldest is between the Quad Cities and Chicago along I-88. And then the most recent one is on I-39 between Chicago and Danville. And again, we can talk a little further about that later on.
Great, thank you. So yeah, moving on, looking at the development of NITA legislation, of course, it was a multi-year process. At the same time, the Blue Ribbon Commission final report came out, and the statewide public transportation plan, Next Move Illinois, is underway. So for Hannah and David, how are these plans interconnected, and what are some of the most important recommendations or actions that will impact downstate and rural agencies? One thing that comes to mind in particular is activating the Interagency Coordinating Committee on Transit Innovation, Integration, and Reform, ICCTIIR. It's intended to improve coordination, influence statewide priorities, data expectations, and integration with intercity bus and rail, among other things. Can you speak a little more to these initiatives, how IDOT is preparing for them, and how agencies and the public can get involved? That's a long one, sorry.
Yeah, there was a first question in there, I'm sure, that talked about the plans. So
Yes.
I'll talk about the plans, being the planning person. The Blue Ribbon Commission is something that does not happen very often. That is something that I think is really special, very, very to the moment right now. They met for about 2 years, produced a report. I can't remember if it was officially January or November, but we first started seeing these recommendations come out. And it basically, is talking about, how does IDOT do IDOT? It's less of a transportation plan and more of a strategic plan for how the state does transportation, if that makes any sense. But, it's looking at our processes, it's looking at the personnel, it's looking at everything, which, obviously does trickle down to the end users. So with that kind of at the peak of the hierarchy of plans, then next we have our long-range transportation plan, which every state is mandated to do. There's federal guidelines, federal approval processes, but we've taken the recommendations from the Blue Ribbon Commission and woven them into all of our plans. So you're going to see little blue ribbons next to any kind of goal, strategy, action that comes out of our long-range plan, our active transportation plan, and then also Next Move Illinois, our statewide public transportation plan. That long-range transportation plan, it is very multimodal in nature, and that's just where kind of Next Move was originally born, is that you don't have the opportunity to really expand on mobility themes in a way that does any kind of justice to the work that David and his coworkers do. So Next Move is kind of half of our strategic plan for the Transit Bureau of Operations, Bureau of Transit Capital, Transit Compliance, as well as talking about those mobility themes from the long-range transportation plan. And then while we were making this statewide public transportation plan, the legislature was very busy trying to make transit better in ways that we can't reach as administrators. So we are thankful that it was happening during the plan process. We've been able to take a little bit of time, a little bit longer time than we planned, but being able to adjust and realize that the ceiling just got higher. And that's been really encouraging, something that we're really excited about. And I think it's Article 2 or so of Senate Bill 2111 that introduces this absolute word salad of a committee. If anybody has renaming suggestions, come find us. But that ICCTIIR, as I understand it, I think Dr. Sriraj can give a little bit more background to its origins about 20 years ago. There's a lot of overlap between the original ICCT and this new committee. That Article 2, like I said in the legislation, it tasks IDOT with having this commission look at a lot of similar themes that happened in Next Move Illinois, but I think the key here is that this is going to have a lot more external stakeholders involved. So it's going to be an opportunity to bring in more outside perspectives, build on Next Move Illinois, and kind of take it to places that, you know, without this committee, I'm not sure we would have the same amount of success in the future. So I'm really grateful that all of it's happened the way it has. But please, David, if I'm missing something, fill in.
Yeah, no, so just kind of to expand on what Hannah said there, you know, some of the downstate transit agencies are going to be invited to be stakeholders on this commission, whatever we're calling it. So that way they, you know, there is a vote there to further, you know, this idea of working together, of the fundraising and all of that. But the public in general and all the transit agencies are going to have a seat at the table and a voice, because, you know, the plan is for these to be open meetings. There's going to be surveys that go out, and so I would encourage anyone from the public, from the other transit agencies, to respond to those surveys, to, you know, participate and speak up in these open meetings. It's the only way that, you know, we can ensure that every voice is being heard.
Yeah. And the one thing that I'll say too is, you know, thinking about people that, you know, maybe they aren't, you know, appointed formally to this commission. You know, I've talked to people at PACE, and they're pretty excited about this committee. While it deals specifically with outside of the NITA region, you know, there's a lot of similar land use patterns that you see in downstate communities that you see throughout the Chicago suburbs as well. So I think there's still an overall importance to the state at large with this committee, but definitely excited to be able to bring in more people and empower them to help make, you know, some really cool planning decisions.
Yeah, thank you. And Hannah, you alluded to bringing Dr. Sriraj in to talk a little bit more about the history and sort of previous iterations. I'm just curious your thoughts on what worked well before, what didn't, and what could be done better this time.
Phew. How much time do we have? And then the reference to ICCT takes me back to circa 2004 or thereabouts, when the Interagency Coordinating Committee for Transportation, I believe that's what the acronym stood for, and it's gotten bigger now with time. And that was meant to address transit issues, not just here in Chicago, but also downstate. And as I've said that to a few people that I've run into today, it was very difficult, cumbersome process. Western Illinois University has the Rural Transit Assistance Center. They tried to be the manager of this, but because most of the players, because of DIPIT, another acronym, was headquartered in Chicago. That's IDOT's Division of Public and Intermodal Transportation. All the meetings were happening in Chicago, and this was pre-internet technology advancement days. So phone conversations for those that were unable to participate. Long story short, it ran its course. It was enabled by legislation over a period of time, 2008 or thereabouts. FTA came out with funding that allowed for statewide management plans to be created. Illinois was one of the very few states that applied for, got the grant, tried to do something with so this was all through the ages of ICCT. And they worked on the grant, tried to create a statewide management plan between 2008 and 10. I believe, if my memory serves me right, Don Piper at Western Illinois University was the manager, mobility manager for Illinois. And that led to another iteration of that we were involved in. IDOT funded us to create a data set and a repository of human service transportation regions with all the transit operators in the state as an interactive map. And that lasted another 4 years. More recently, we've been working on other rural transit issues, 4 counties to begin with in 2020, 2021 timeframe, followed by another 12 counties, trying to understand what are the mobility challenges that these people all know much better than I can articulate, but I'll try. Long trips, larger areas leading to the more than a million miles, right? And just a plethora of trip types. Everything that one can think of and one would not associate with public transportation being made with public transportation. And just to go back before ICCT, one of the very first initiatives when I came to UIC was computer-aided scheduling and dispatching. And I believe one of you referred to your scheduling system. And that's a long way from how these systems were managed back in the day. So there's some inherent challenges, resource issues, capacity issues, all of those that need to be. And then through all of this, the one thread, coming back to your question, coordination has been the one thing that has been the most challenging, that has not been accomplished. So there is a new attempt now, and I promised someone that I will say this. It almost feels like old wine in a new bottle, right? But as long as the intent is there to do the right thing, if you still keep at it, maybe you will get there some point in time. And so with all of the advances we've made with technological and other aspects, maybe this iteration of, and correct me if I'm getting the acronym wrong, ICCTIIR, that's a mouthful. Hopefully that will do something that ICCT, the parent ICCT, was unable to. So I don't know if that answered your question, but that's my reflection.
Yes, thank you. And I will keep us moving a little bit. I was going to jump to Kim and Greg if there's anything you wanted to add on that topic. Otherwise, I might keep us moving.
I think I'm just going to borrow a phrase that Hannah used, and I think that the doctor has also referred to, and that's raising the ceiling. For us, expectations, because all the common material that you just heard in terms of coordination and so forth, that's very real on the front line in a regular conversation that Kim and I in different meetings are trying to find solutions for, resolution to, and also in our partnership meetings, obviously, with IDOT, another key theme.
Thank you. So going back to Dr. Sriraj, I brought up your recent research with UIC Urban Transportation Center on the return on investment for rural demand response transit in Illinois, completed last year. And you mentioned there's a couple other studies that you've worked on in rural transit in rural areas. Just wondering if you can speak a little more to the findings of these studies and what it means in terms of the importance of transit in rural communities, especially for certain demographics or populations. And I'll just throw in the follow-up now, but how it might be able to shape implementation of NITA bill in rural areas.
All right, so although there is a fair amount of fixed route services in the rural parts of the state, the majority of the services are still demand response. And one of the knocks on demand response services, and this is just the way the industry has looked at them, the way the public narrative has been on it, is cost per trip. And the cost per trip tends to be very unfair to demand response services. They paint them in a very unfavorable light. They are very high, and it's very difficult for operators and others to justify to a decision maker as to why public dollars are to be spent, so much of the public dollars, when you look at it from that metrics perspective, $30, $35 per trip, is that the appropriate use of resources is the question. So there is a need to defend that. There's a need to kind of explain it away. So that's what we tried to do with our most recent work, and my colleague Jin, raise your hand, and I worked on trying to quantify this. Very, very rudimentary approach to looking at what the numbers were showing in terms of, by talking to all the transit operators, trying to get as much information as we could gather from them, how much return on investment are these services getting? So we focused only on the state of Illinois investment aspect, and we gathered a whole slew of non-monetary benefits that could be monetized that are attributable to these services. And when you do that, when the cost to benefit ratio, in a manner that decision makers tend to understand more easily, we were able to show for them, and we came out with four typologies, if you will, of systems. And then the highest was $4 per dollar invested in return. The lowest was a little bit, tad bit under $1. I'm not hiding that, but it's still as close to $1 as you can get. So it just conveys the bottom line that these are not drains on your resources. There is value to be had if you look at it from a societal perspective. And that's what we were trying to do. Of course, we can refine it, we can prune it and make it more rigorous. But at first blush, it was a revelation for us that this is how much it can get you in return. And that is something that needs to be conveyed to the appropriate authorities. That's the whole intent. Of course, the other studies were impetus to this study, because we tried to understand how the trips were being made, what were they being made for. There is this social determinants of health aspect that we took to it. We focused on access to medical facilities, but we also wanted to include groceries, access to fresh groceries, access to other leisure items. So there's a whole slew of other societal aspects that we included in the trip patterns, and we wanted to quantify them. And that's what gave us these numbers that I'm parroting in front of you. Bottom line, they look much better than what I thought they would look like.
That's great. Thank you. So yeah, looking toward NCAT now. I know recently completed a strategic plan which looked at future service, governance, and funding. NCAT is operated by the City of Ottawa, but serves all of LaSalle County. Yet the county itself doesn't contribute dedicated funding. One of the major findings during the planning process was that mismatch between the operating entity, the decision-making structure, the funding partners, and the service area. Kim, I know in a previous conversation you mentioned that one of your biggest challenges is connecting NCAT riders with regional destinations like Joliet and Peoria. So just curious if you can speak to how the rollout of NITA and other statewide initiatives that we've discussed could help NCAT with these challenges.
So, as Jacob mentioned, the City of Ottawa is our grantee, and thankfully they took over because the county didn't want anything to do with the transportation program. The city had experience, they took over, and the county still doesn't care. So what we're most excited about with NITA, and not necessarily with regional connections, but is the fact that they've lowered our local match requirement from 35% to 20%. So coming up with that local match was really hard for us. Again, I think because the county was the grantee and a lot of the other communities, municipalities within the county were like, well, who cares? It's their program, but we serve the entire county. So decreasing that local match is going to be very, very helpful for us, which will allow us to draw down more of our grant funding, which means we can basically provide more service, right? Because we now have a little bit more money. So we're excited about that. In terms of regional connections, there's some things going on. We do travel out of the county. We go to Peoria twice a month. We do not, as of yet, go to Joliet. As part of our strategic plan, that is one of the first locations we're looking at expanding to within the next couple of years. And again, because we have that decrease or increase in local match, however you want to look at it, because we have to pay less in local match, I feel like we're going to be able to still draw some additional local match funds, so we have extra money to provide that extra service within the next 2 to 3 years is my hope. We have an established route, or at least service that way. I know that ICCT thing, whatever. The coordinating part, right? So we do work really well with regional transportation. Our neighbors, sorry, Greg, I'm leaning. I'm trying to make sure everybody on, because the computer's blocking me a little bit, so I'm leaning. Thanks. We do work really well with our neighbors in terms of linking trips. So folks who need to get to Joliet, sometimes we can meet in Morris, which is Grundy County, and they provide the remaining, trip. We meet with Greg all the time to get folks into Dixon, now maybe soon Rockford, and stuff like that. So we do coordinate a lot, but I think again the increased focus maybe on that regional connection that the NITA bill is going to place on us might help us to just kind of expand into different service areas. That answer the
Right.
question?
Yeah, thank you. And I had a follow-up about technology. If there's any, NITA, through NITA and with IDOT, there's hope for improved technology and coordination that we've been talking about. So is there any technology pieces that would be able to help NCAT?
I think from the rider's perspective, just having maybe a more unified way to book or schedule your rides as well as fare payment. So now they have to book their ride through NCAT, then they call Grundy County Transit or Reagan Transit, and they book through them. They get on our bus, they pay our fare, they get on their bus, they pay their fare. If our systems were aligned, it might be a lot easier for them. Maybe now they have to have 2 different apps to pay or 2 different ways to pay versus just having maybe one app. So I would say maybe improved unified or coordinated scheduling programs and or fare payment.
Yeah, and I was just going to add that, speaking to the technology and coordination, that's another project that we are just starting the pilot for in southern Illinois. I don't know if you can see on the map, but almost the entire southern third of the state is covered by 5 providers that have multi-county services. A lot of those individuals are trying to get to St. Louis or the next big city to get to their resources, because as rural as you think it is in NCAT service area or Reagan, you go down south and it's pretty sparse. So we have a grant, a federal grant, that Sean Reese, our deputy director for transit, is leading the project. We have a consultant that is trying to look at those systems down there and figure out, can we integrate the scheduling, integrate the fare payment, make it easier for that whole process Kim described, so that it is more of a one-touch, one-click, one push on your phone, whatever you want to call it. Make it easy, because everybody wants to do the right thing. We don't want all of these kind of what should be unnecessary hurdles in 2026 and stuff that technology can solve. So as long as this ICCT IIR is, I'm grateful that they have added the I for innovation and focusing a lot of that committee's efforts on technology.
I will also add, this isn't pertinent to NCAT, but there are, and David may be able to attest to this, other agencies still in the state that are scheduling 100 or 200 rides a day on an Excel spreadsheet. Some might not even be on Excel. In fact, I've heard some are still on paper. So a technology, that's a big push for the rural agencies.
Great, thank you. Greg, Reagan MTD is organized and governed a little differently than NCAT. Can you speak a little more about what a mass transit district is and how it works in your area? And you alluded to your expansion into Winnebago County. I'm just curious a little bit to hear a little bit more about how Reagan was decided to operate that service rather than Rockford Mass Transit District.
All good questions. Tackling the mass transit district question first, it was actually a conversation that started probably now going on 6 years ago, quite honestly, with my county board as well as the Ogle County board, since we did a 2-county area of service, Lee and Ogle counties. And there was a common understanding, a common interest from the county board sides in terms of mitigating risk from their perspective. And it's not as though that they didn't find value in what the transit system was operating as. They were looking that a mass transit district would be a good model for which to transfer it out of the county model and into a local government model. My shameless side in terms of supporting the mass transit district was I was going to see probably a greater efficiency in terms of the operation overall, and also what that provides is the opportunity to expand. And I will tell you that if you look at the map, you will see that Reagan MTD is also in a beige area to that red area towards the top of the map. Lee, Ogle counties, yes, that's our main service area in addition to rural Winnebago. But come July 1st, we are annexing in Whiteside County, which is just to the west. It will increase our population base of service roughly by 55,000 in terms of population, and our overall square miles of service probably by another 700 square miles. It's a daunting task, and it's not something that's just done overnight, and involves lawyers. But I think in the long run, what I like to see in the mass transit district is I'm now stepping outside my normal county borders, and now I have, pardon the phrase, able to play in a larger sandbox. And the benefit from my perspective for those residents inside those new walls is if we can get creative with how we get to certain resources, because there's certain resources in Dixon that are shared by Sterling residents and vice versa. And does that mean we're going to go with a fixed route solution for regular service between those larger cities? Very possible. And I'm even looking at fixed routes as a solution just for the city of Dixon for the future, and potentially looking at microtransit as another solution, because they just seem to be a tool that is more urbanized, yes, in its roots, but it's also becoming a little bit more of a solution for rural areas, not for all of them, but for certain areas of rural America. In terms of Winnebago County, I can look to David because he can verify this. I was sitting on a beach in Florida, by the way, in March, probably 3 years ago, when the phone rings and it's like, David Schafer is calling me. Why is David Schafer calling me? Doesn't he know I'm on vacation? And the short of the conversation was, would you have interest in actually being the operator of a service for rural Winnebago? And I said, why wouldn't I? That area, like I said previously, has gone without service. And it was supported, the initiation of that rural transit piece for rural Winnebago was supported by data that was actually done by the Region 1 Planning Council out of Rockford. My hiccup was that I had county board members up there that were saying, I talked to my constituents, and we don't need that service. Thank God I had some, what I would say are privates or people on the county board that actually could speak up and support us and say, you know what, that is not necessarily the truth for your constituents, but for my constituents, they are on islands in rural Winnebago County, and they need a service. Because if they don't get it, they're relying on family and friends to take them to appointments or such, and they can't always lean in that direction. So we need to find a better solution. A side note to that conversation from those negative county board members, I just had a conversation with one of the representatives from Winnebago County last week, and he says, Greg, some of those people who were your naysayers are now your biggest supporters because they now see the value in actually starting that service.
That's great. And also what Dr. Sriraj was talking about, the return on investment can be helpful in those types of conversations, trying to win people over. All right, so move on to funding a little bit more. Kim started talking about the downstate operating assistance program, acronym DOPE. The reimbursement rate used to be 65%. With NITA, it's going up to 80%. Oh man. Beginning in fiscal year 2027, which could ease local match pressure and enable previously cost-prohibitive service improvements, like you were talking about. I think we'll start with Hannah and David. If you could talk a little bit more about how DOPE reimbursement works and what the change in reimbursement rate means from IDOT's perspective.
I'm going to let David take most of that, but all I'll say is that I have gotten to work closely with a lot of transit providers, and what you get outside of Chicago is the idea that they're all wearing like 37 hats. So if they can take a few off when it comes to local match, like Kim was starting to say, like they're going to have so much more capacity to focus on service, focus on what they want to do rather than what they have to do.
So when I was preparing for today, I really wanted to try and figure out, okay, how can I quantify this? And so I've got some numbers here. So for state fiscal year 27, which is going to start here in July, we are projecting eligible operating expenses for outside of the NITA region to be $498 million. So looking at that, at a 65% reimbursement rate, which is where we were, we would be reimbursing about $323.7 million to those transit agencies. Leaves a large gap for several of these small counties to come up with. At the new 80% reimbursement rate, it's going to be an increase of approximately $74.7 million of operating assistance. So we're going to reimburse roughly $398.4 million. So it's a very large increase when we look at some of these smaller counties. What it's going to allow some of these counties to do is stop providing service only from the hours of like 8 to 2 or 8 to 3 because they don't have the drivers to be able to provide that service. They're going to be able to hire more drivers. Greg talked about doing the hours of 6 to 6 right now. Well, as I called Greg and asked Greg about rural Winnebago, in the next couple of years, I'm going to be calling Greg, hey, Greg, you got a lot of factories there in Dixon. What's the chances that we, pick up that next shift? So we're going to be working with these transit agencies and our partners to try and expand that service. We want to make sure that everybody has affordable access to transit. That's our number one goal. And it's the reason why, we come to work every day. It's a passion for us. These services are instrumental. The service contracts, some agencies were only able to offer public transit a couple of hours a day due to the need for service contracts. And now they can cut loose some of these service contracts and just concentrate on the general public.
Great, thank you. I do want to leave time for questions. I just have one more topic, which is the fund braiding, but the rest of the panel, anything else to say on DOPE before I go? If they had
They've
before I
already
go.
heard from me. I already said my piece. Thank you, Ida. And
I know that David alluded to this, but the first thing that tangibly I want to do in the next fiscal year is actually tackle exactly what he said in terms of the businesses that have 3 shifts. Currently, we can get people to the second shift and home from the third shift, but we can't get them home from the second shift nor to the start of the third shift. And I've already been challenged by one of the locally owned family organizations, a rather large factory in our neck of the woods, that has already said they will buy me a bus if I can actually make that happen. So guess what? That is on the front burner.
The last topic I'll mention is with NITA. Legislation states that the ICC-TIR committee shall develop recommendations and strategies to use federal fund braiding to meet local match requirements for state and federal grants. So Dr. Sriraj, I'll start with you. You mentioned research with focus on social determinants of health, with particular emphasis on access to medical facilities. You mentioned some health and human service departments, other agencies that are not currently commingling resources. Can you speak a little more to how fund braiding works to leverage resources?
I wish I knew. But the fund braiding circular has been in existence, and it's an initiative led by USDOT with FTA leading the way to allow for grant applicants and grant recipients to broaden the base, essentially, because there is this. You heard about the difficulty in raising the match. And one of the little-known factoids is that there is a lot more transportation dollars coming out of the other federal departments than just the USDOT. There's so many other federal departments that fund transportation services. And it behooves the local applicant and other entities to understand where these resources are going in their neck of the woods, right? So if you are able to form a coalition or coordination or integration, you are able to maximize those resources towards addressing not just your needs, but also in meeting the requirements of the match that you're applying for. So it's a win-win all around. It's a synergy that can be obtained. Unfortunately, and we've been talking to many of the operators through the last 4 years or so, while the transit operators may know of it, the other entities that are in their region may not be aware of it, or there is not just a good forum where this could be cooked to make it happen. So there are some significant, and then these all boil down to resource issues, capacity issues, right? So if these two are here today, then how much of what they are doing are they sacrificing to take care of this? So I'm not talking about just this conference. So there's only so many people in every rural transit entity, and then they can only do so much. So if fund braiding becomes a front burner issue, they need to hire. So for that, they may need resources. They may need to go around their region, educating their stakeholders, educating their partners. And that's a full-time job in and of itself, in my opinion. And one of the reasons why that has not taken off to the extent that it should have is probably in that. And we at the Transportation Center, we've been trying to get a conversation going with FTA just to, and then they've been more than helpful, right? I mean, they've been offering to give educational seminars about fund braiding, work with stakeholders, applicants to teach them how to braid the funds. And so it is there, but it has not necessarily had the impact that people hoped it would. So it's a resource that has not been tapped to its fullest extent, in our opinion.
Great. Go ahead, please.
Yes, so just to add on that, one thing IDOT is doing, and this is kind of through FTA as well, is we are partnering with what's called CCAMTAC. It's the Coordinated Council on Access and Mobility Technical Assistance Center. They have put together a book, and I think there's something like 130 different funding sources for fund braiding. And so what we're trying to do is work with other state agencies that are receiving some sort of federal funding to try and figure out how can we pool that funding together? How can we intertwine or braid that funding to help that state agency and our transit partners? Because they're required to provide certain services. We've got now transit agencies that are working with probation, working with the county jails, working with Veterans Administration. So there are so many different funding sources out there. We're trying to pool that. And so it's breaking down those silos.
And just to kind of give you an understanding of what David was referring to, there are about 142 or 145 federal transportation funding programs that exist. And usually I ask this in many of my classes, how many of them come out of the USDOT? And the answer is that it's a very small minority. The majority of transportation funding comes from all the other federal departments put together. So when you have, and David was referring to 130 or so fund braiding opportunities that exist, and that's mainly because of the plethora of funding opportunities that are aimed at transportation that do not come out of DOT. And the more you know about them, the better it is for your case.
Great, thank you. We've got 9 minutes left. Anyone else have anything burning on fund braiding? Otherwise, I think we'll open it to questions, so everybody has an opportunity to chime in.
They got questions.
All right, and Haley is going to come around with the microphone. Thank you.
Hello, Jeremiah Cox, work for an MPO in Indiana. I applaud you for getting transit almost everywhere. But my question is, can can I basically leave Chicago, get on an intercity bus, and or I guess downstate Amtrak train and connect to all of these agencies, to like, every address in these small towns? Or is that not currently feasible?
So, first, I'm glad you mentioned intercity bus, because it is something that I did want to touch on. We do have a new intercity bus plan, and it's a study plan, and we've kept the consultants on. They're going to be doing some pilot programs for us. So yes, you can get on intercity bus, and it'll take you, again, through the service that that Greg is sponsoring. You can get on Greyhound and take it down towards Galesburg, Bloomington, all the way down towards Danville. And then you can take some, what's that?
LaSalle County.
Oh, LaSalle County as well. So you can take that, then the rural transit, and hopefully be able to get to that final destination. Is it perfect right now? No. But that is what the ICCTIIR is hoping to do. We have HSTP coordinators, which is Human Service Transportation Program, and they are working between these different transit organizations to try and provide that service. So, is it perfect right now? No. Can it happen? With a lot of work. But it's also several different fares. Let's talk in 5 years. Hopefully it's a lot better. Thank you.
For Greg, on the funding for the rural Winnebago County, I know you've got 5311 for rural counties, and then you have 5307 for UZAs. How are you bridging that funding gap for a rural part of an urban county?
Great question. He's going to talk more about the formula side. I only get 5311 in DOPE, Downstate Operating Assistance Program, since it's outside the urban area. So 5307 is obviously restricted to that urban area. But we play really well with the other RMT, the Rockford MTD, in terms of transition. So we have a process set up that if somebody from rural Winnebago actually has to go in to the urbanized area for, say, a medical appointment, there's a seamless transition with basically from their main location downtown in Rockford, and then vice versa. And it's seamless, and to the person who is actually taking that ride, I don't think there's any cost on the Rockford Mass Transit District side, and on our side, it's very nominal.
I think, yeah.
So my question is, because you do rides on demand, a lot of rides on demand, are there any incentives like one-day passes or monthly passes where you're gonna already get the money up front, and maybe they only ride once, or they ride multiple times, and you already get you have money on the books, and then a person can just keep riding, or now it's say, hey, I know I'm doing this monthly instead of me every day scheduling and then paying. Is there some type of pass product that your organizations have?
So through our transportation scheduling software, we can offer what we call subscription rides. So if somebody's going to work Monday through Friday, same time, same place, they just book one time and that ride is automatically scheduled for them. So in that term, it's really simple. And then we do have a pass program. We don't offer like monthly passes. They put $100 on the card. They scan their card every time they get on the bus, and it just deducts. Once they get low, the driver says, hey, you got to put more money on, and then they put more money on. So I've thought about the actual month pass part. We just haven't moved to it yet because I don't quite know how to administer all of that stuff with the rides and stuff. But we do have a pass system, and I believe scheduling goes the same way for you, and they have a pass system also.
Yep.
Good question.
Alvaro Villagrán with the Shared Use Mobility Center. Very quickly starting my question, we have been a technical assistant provider for the Federal Transit Administration Mobility Innovation Grants, and one of the projects that we supported there was the creation of Easy Fare by NeoRide. That is a platform that has been developed across multiple agencies starting in Ohio and has been expanding to multiple states across the region since then. So the question is twofold. First, for the local agencies, have you heard about that platform, that the NeoRide, the Easy Fare, that is available, ready to go? And if you have what have been any challenges in maybe tapping in there, and then for IDOT, what would be if there is any idea for either in the context of NITA or your own programming to have like statewide procurement that could allow these type of platforms to be developed and adopted by agencies across the state.
I'm really not familiar with Easy Fare, but I think Kim and I would definitely have interest in learning more about things of that nature, especially if it can have a greater presence and effectiveness to the system.
And for IDOT side, we are going to be trying to test some sort of platform with the ICAM pilot program in the southern portion of Illinois. At some point, hopefully within the next 6 months, we will probably push out an RFI, a request for information, to see what platforms are out there. We're also going to be touring to a few different states. One of them is out at Caltrans in California to try and see, okay, what are your guys' platforms? Because from what we can see, California is one of the ones that does it the best. So we're going to be looking at that and pushing the RFI out. So just, see what's all out there.
Great. I think we have time for one more, if anybody else has a question. Is that Matt?
Hi, everyone. Thanks for all the questions answered already. My last question is about something that our IDOT friends mentioned regarding the HSTP coordinator program. I'm curious what you all see as sort of the primary function of that position and those regional staff, and what some of the challenges and opportunities you see in terms of coordination.
So I'm going to ask a former coordinator to kind of speak towards what she's seen as one of those primary goals, and then I'll follow up with it.
So just a little background. My first step into transit was as one of these regional coordinators from about the I-80 north. Hannah also was. So I guess you could have thrown this to her, not me. That's actually how Hannah and I met. So I felt my role was really to work with the transit agencies, make sure they had all the resources they could possibly get. And if they didn't know how to get a question answered, or if there had a rider who needed to go somewhere, like I felt it was my responsibility to reach out to those neighboring agencies to make sure that ride was provided. I did take a call about somebody in rural Winnebago County because I was the coordinator for Region 1, and I'm super stoked. I hope this person gets on the bus now. Of course, it was 5 years ago, so. But I was really excited to hear that Winnebago County was now having service so that those types of people could access transportation. So certainly, making those connections between the counties and being a resource for riders who didn't really know how to navigate the transit system, I thought was another important. I didn't get very many phone calls from the public, but I thought that was a really important role. And then kind of being a liaison to IDOT with any other issues that the agencies might be having. I thought communicating those questions as a whole to IDOT was also really important.
So to follow up on that, the HSTP regions right now and the work that they do, I believe will probably start to shift as we start to really dive into this ICCTIIR. And that's an acronym. But if we want to touch and focus more on that coordination piece. And so once we assemble this panel, we want to get their feedback, their input, so that way we can kind of scope more for those HSTP providers.
Okay, thank you. Well, I think we are at time, so please thank you all of our panelists for joining. I think this is a really great conversation, and thanks to everyone for attending and for all of your questions. Really appreciate it.